Hello everyone, it's your Peacekeeper, and it's time for a premium ship review. This is the Tier 8 Italian Battleship Roma, and this is a much anticipated battleship for this game, and it's a little quirky, but the nice part is that the Roma and the Littorio class battleships actually have a really awesome history, so let's dive right on into this. Roma was the third of the Littorio-class battleships serving in the Regia Marina, which is the Italian Navy, during World War II. Laid down in 1938 and launched in 1940, Roma would incorporate some changes over the original Littorio-class battleships. Most notably, the bow was redesigned to give the ship additional freeboard, which is the height above the water that the deck is. So you can see it kind of raises up here. That was to to decrease the wet deck that is associated with, traveling through big waves in heavy ships like this. But what makes Littorio unique, and Roma unique, is that they boasted some of the highest muzzle velocity and best penetrating 15-inch rounds of World War II. Capable of launching a shell to 46,800 yards, or 42.8 kilometers, the M1934 15-inch gun is widely regarded as the best 15-inch gun ever produced. And it proved to be reliable and well-liked by the Italian Navy. What was not liked, though, was the lack of consistent ammunition or powder, and that actually plagued a few of the Littorios during combat and drastically reduced their accuracy. With a good batch of shells and good powder, the M1934 15-inch rifles were a very accurate naval rifle. The biggest advantage that Roma had over other battleships at the time was the use of a spaced armor scheme that incorporated decapping plates. The outer hull plating was a 70mm plate that was backed up by quite a lot of open space, then a 280mm thick belt that was inclined 11 degrees, plus 50mm or 2 inches of timber, then 1 inch of skin plating, and finally a 1.5 inch thick splinter wall that backed that up. This spaced armor scheme had a number of distinct advantages, and it provided a fairly good immunity zone. The Littorios and Roma could withstand their own shell fire from 16 kilometers on out. Now, for those of you who don't know what decapping is, armor-piercing rounds have a hardened cap on the nose of the projectile underneath the windscreen, and that windscreen is basically the point of it. If you were to knock that windscreen off underneath of it, it's almost a flat spot on the shell, and at the top of that is a hardened steel cap, and that's designed to allow the shell to penetrate at odd angles. What a decapping plate does is it knocks that cap off the top of that shell, and it reduces the amount of penetration and actually, in some cases, can prevent it from penetrating. And what the Italians found during testing is that you need roughly 70mm of armor to decap most armor-piercing projectiles. Now, there's some people that are going to go to the Iowa class. It's a different discussion for a different day, and whether or not that was effective, but really, the Littorio class was one of the few classes of ships during World War II that incorporated such an advanced armor design. Unfortunately, would not save the ship, though. Launched in 1940 and commissioned into service in 1942, Roma's life was relatively short-lived due to a combination of lack of supplies for the ship, primarily fuel, and a lack of escorts both naval and air. Her first year was spent as part of the 9th Naval Division based in Taranto. Taranto. I don't know how to say that well. Taranto. It's not Toronto, Canada. Taranto, Italy. North Africa. In November of 1942, she moved to Naples due to the Allied invasion of North Africa. There she evaded Allied air attacks, just to be restationed to La Spezia. In 1943, the Allies were bombing La Spezia frequently in an attempt to sink the Italian ships there. On June 5th, Roma and her sister Vittorio Veneto were hit by 2,000-pound armor-piercing bombs dropped by B-17s. The damage to Roma consisted primarily of ruptured bulkheads near the front of the ship. The first bomb actually hit the ship and penetrated the deck and then popped out the side and detonated next to it. The other one detonated beside the ship and caused flooding. She would again be damaged by bombs dropped on June 23rd and June 24th, which destroyed her staterooms in the aft of the ship and caused some damage there. Now, one did actually hit the top of the rear turret, but it didn't cause any real damage due to the thick armor there. She sailed to Genoa for repairs and later returned to La Spezia in August. In September of 1943, the Italian armistice was signed, which signaled the end of Italy's involvement in World War II. The remnants of the Italian Navy, which included the 3 Littorio-class battleships, numerous cruisers, and destroyers, began sailing out of La Spezia and other places in Italy to avoid having the fleet fall into German hands. Fearing what would happen to the fleet if they surrendered to Allied forces in Malta, the commander of the fleet sailed instead for Sardinia. After discovering it was occupied by the Germans, they began sailing for the port of Beaune. Upon learning of the Italian Navy's attempt to hand the ships over to the Allies, the German Air Force launched a flight of Dornier Do-217s armed with the Fritz X radio-controlled bombs to attack the ship in the Strait of Bonifacio. At 3:37 p.m., the Luftwaffe began their attack on the fleet. The first Fritz X bomb, that's a tongue twister, penetrated Roma on the starboard side. The bomb penetrated through the ship and detonated under the hull of the ship underwater, and this caused significant damage to the ship and caused a large amount of flooding and slowed the ship down. The flooding also caused electrical fires to start up on board the ship as well, which threatened to detonate the aviation gas storage on board the ship. At 4:02 p.m., another Fritz X bomb hit Roma in the midsection and detonated in the forward engine room, which caused heavy damage to the ship again and started to flood the number 2 turret magazine as well as the port side secondary mount. Seconds later, the number 2 turret exploded due to a magazine detonation, and it blew the turret out of the ship. The ship capsized, broke in two, and took 1,393 men down with her. Actually, the resting place of Roma was located in June of 2012 and is now dedicated as a war grave. In terms of her in-game playstyle, Roma's in-game persona is a bit conflicted. The ship is very tanky when bow on, but the high, above-water citadel means that proper angling is a must. And if you don't, the ship will be easily sunk. You cannot sail broadside in this ship, or you will definitely receive citadel hits all the time. Players of Iowa will be very familiar with the playstyle. Her gunnery mirrors the bad powder and shell values for accuracy, and not the very accurate values with proper shells and powder. So, the ship's not very accurate. In fact, this ship's best played range is, 12 kilometers and in. And thankfully, this ship has some things that are going for it. But one of the best things that this ship has is a ridiculously high amount of shell penetration. This ship does not struggle to make it through the belt armor of any battleship in game, and I've even received penetrating hits, like I have caused penetrating hits through the forward gun mounts of some of battleships that I was shooting at. I was firing at an Iowa at relatively close range, and it to me, it looked like it impacted the turret face of the number 2 turret and detonated inside it, but it caused a normal penetration damage. That might be just the hitbox. Maybe it hit the conning tower behind it. I don't know, but either way, there's plenty of armor there, plenty of armor penetration there. Of course, you actually have to hit the target, and sometimes that's not very reliable. Gun damage is actually quite excellent. The AP shells, the Citadel damage is 12,000, which is pretty dang good when you think about it. I have to point this out. basically, if you find another broadside battleship in Roma, and you're within its magical range and the guns decide to cooperate, you can citadel most battleships fairly easily. And you're going to struggle with some of the ships that have underwater citadels, like the the Royal Navy battleships are still a fair bit hard to citadel, but you can, and I have, and U.S. battleships that expose too much broadside, yeah, they definitely will eat citadels all day long, and Yamato is not immune to the effects of the AP as well, and of course neither is Roma herself. The ship is also unbelievably stealthy for a Tier 8 battleship. At just 11.2 kilometers in detection range, I want to say that's the second best detection range at the tier. Very, very stealthy, and this ship, at that range, if you can catch a cruiser broadside, it is definitely going to be a bad day for that cruiser. Also, the ship is quite maneuverable. However, owing to the fact that the ship's guns only really work at closer ranges, this ship's secondary battery is pretty bad. Like, legitimately bad. Which is interesting because in real life, these were some of the better secondary mounts ever made. I guess you can't have the ship be everything, but it's interesting to me that the secondary battery, you got 6.6 kilometers. That's going to be with advanced firing training on the captain. You can push that out a little bit further, an additional 20% if you want to, but you're going to have to give up accuracy, the main battery, to get it, which I'm not interested in doing because of how inaccurate the ship is. So 6.6 kilometers, but they just don't seem to fire all that often. The 6-inch gun mounts fire AP, which is great if you got a cruiser that's broadside and they somehow manage to hit, but you're not starting very many fires with this thing. You do have 6 90mm gun mounts on each side, and they do have a 5% fire chance and a 3.8 second reload. Really not the strong suit of this ship. The other downside to this ship is its anti-aircraft defense is also really quite bad. I suppose if you were to spec fully into it, meaning manual fire control for AA, advanced firing training, basic firing training, and then the module in the upgrade slot, it would actually probably be decent, but you've also given up all the other capabilities of the ship. So the hybrid captain build that I'm running, yeah, it doesn't necessarily work out all that well. If you end up facing against a Tier 6 aircraft carrier, it will destroy the aircraft fairly readily, but that's true of just about any Tier 8 battleship, including the Amagi at this tier. So, yeah, it's not good when you're facing Tier 8 aircraft. It's really not that good. So overall, the ship is, I would say, distinctly average. I mean, it has some good games, and right now it's enjoying some really good stats. However, I can't help but think that the ship would probably be better off with a slight tweak in its accuracy. But that's personally just me. I know that there are some people that can get this thing to work better than I can. Now, interesting little Easter egg here, and I can't really see it on this side, so let's see if we can get it from the other side. Wargaming has included, and it's buried. Maybe I can get it with one of the single mounts. No, those are all the way up there. Okay, we got to get it from a dual mount. Oh, for Pete's sakes. There's an Easter egg in the ship here. No, we got to keep going back further. There is an interesting Easter egg hidden. No. Okay, it's not going to let me show you. There is an Easter egg hidden, and if you get the camera angle just right, you can kind of sort of see it. Buried down underneath this platform here is a Fritz X bomb, which is where one of the Fritz X bombs actually hit the ship. You can kind of see it lingering back in there right there. Captain build, let's talk about the captain build real quick. I am running my U.S. Navy hybrid build, so preventative maintenance in the first slot, expert marksman, a superintendent concealment expert, that's the first 10 points. From there, I go to advanced firing training, then to basic firing training, then to adrenaline rush. And this build, it tends to kind of minimize some of the downsides to the ship, most notably the lack of anti-aircraft. it helps with that. It also boosts your rate of fire of your secondaries from when you are up close and personal. It's pretty good for survivability. You've got that extra heal there. You've got an extra fighter. And I have used them all in this ship before. So, definitely something to keep in mind. Superintendent, very useful. Of course, if you want any other builds, go check out my US Battleship build. That build that I use on there is usually my starting point for most battleships that I play. It's you'll see it again if I ever do a Dunkirk review. That's the same build that I run on my Dunkirk captain. It's a very good all-around build, and it tends to help in all the key points, mostly in the AA department. And at Tier 8, you are going to see a fair number of aircraft carriers, so that build is pretty useful. So check out that the U.S. Navy Captain build video for more possibilities on builds. I don't think a secondary build is really all that useful on this ship, so I don't think there's any need to really run that, but, like the survivability build stuff, that's there too. Let's cover some stats. Roma has 65,400 hit points, up to 380 millimeters of armor. Special note, this ship does not have the spaced armor decapping thing that I talked about earlier. In fact, it does have spaced armor. However, the outer belt is a 375mm outer belt and then a 40mm Citadel plate behind it. Not anywhere near as effective as the actual armor profile would have been, but it's there nonetheless. One other interesting thing to note is the upper belt area is armored, 70mm worth. And so if you can bait a Yamato to shoot at the side of your ship while you're angled, unless he can punch through the 70mm upper belt here, he's not going to be doing too much damage. The ship also does employ a little bit of an incremental armor scheme. We have a 130mm fore-end armor strake that goes out in front of the turrets, and it's pretty tanky. Like I said, when you're bow on, it's pretty tanky. The rear gun turret actually has a pretty good angle. You do have to expose just enough that I would recommend masking it or making it so that you can't use the rear turret in between firing, because if you don't, you will be accepting lots and lots of probably Citadel penetrations if it comes in through the armor belt here, and you can see here, your armor belt comes all the way up to basically here. Your Citadel is sitting at that line, and it is fairly easy to hit. So, okay, moving on here. It does have a torpedo protection reduction of 40%, owing to a very good torpedo damage system, torpedo defense system. The main battery consists of three triple 381mm or 15-inch 50 caliber M1934 rifles. They have an 18.1 kilometer main battery firing range, which is extremely short, but you don't have enough accuracy to really use anything beyond that. 30-second reload time, 180-degree turn time of 26.9 seconds, which is very good. 227-meter dispersion, but really low sigma, so it's not very consistent in how tight the shells group up. HE is really rather average too, 5100 damage, 24% fire chance. AP is really where the business is at on this ship. Thank you, Wargaming. And that's 12,000 damage for a Citadel hit. Your secondary battery consists of 12 of these 90mm 50 caliber gun mounts. They look like little pop guns. I don't know how that's... Well, I guess 90mm times 50. That would still be a very short barrel. That 6.6 kilometers is the firing range there. That's going to be with advanced firing training. 3.8 second reload time, 5% fire chance. Really not that useful. The 6-inch gun mounts here, there are 4 triple 6-inch gun mounts mounted. They are in wings. This ship's got wings. If I can get the camera to behave, you can see them a little bit better here. You got one on the front, one in the back on each side. So 4 total. The same 6.6 kilometer firing range, 11.4 second reload time, 3,100 shell AP damage. So if you can catch a cruiser that goes broadside and hit them with it, and you can actually Citadel them. but not very common, so I wouldn't rely on that. Anti-aircraft defense starting out at the furthest point, 4.8 kilometers, those 90mm guns serving as dual-purpose gun mounts. 4.8 kilometers is very short for a Tier 8 battleship in terms of your hardest hitting anti-aircraft gun mounts. It then steps down from 4.8 to 4.2 kilometers with these 37mm gun mounts. You got 8 dual 37mm gun mounts and then 4 singles. And then we have, all 4 of the singles are mounted on the very front of the ship. And then 16 dual 20mm gun mounts there. You can see them there. Maneuverability, 31.5 knot top speed. I believe that's going to be with the speed flag. So take it off and we should be at 30. So 30 knot top speed, 810 meter turning radius, 12.5 second rudder shift time. Detection range by sea, 11.2 kilometers. That's with Concealment Expert and with the Concealment Module. 10.3 kilometers by air. 13.7 after firing your guns in smoke, for those who care about that. Alright, let's look at some upgrades. I am running Main Armaments Mod 1 on this ship. That's pretty unusual, actually. I generally run Auxiliary Armaments Mod 1, but I'm finding that the ship loses turrets fairly regularly, and I think having the 20% additional reduction in the chance of your main battery being incapacitated on top of preventative maintenance's reduction is a good idea. Plus, you get an extra 50% hit points to that main battery, and you decrease the time it takes to repair them by 20%. Of course, if you are worried about, Roma's final fate in real life, and the magazine detonation that claimed those men, you could take Magazine Mod 1 for the 70% reduction in the ship's chance of the ship detonating. In the second slot, I am running Damage Control Systems Mod 1. This is no surprise, it's a battleship. And minus 3% to the risk of flooding, as well as the damage received when a torpedo hits the actual torpedo protection system. Also minus 5% to the risk of fire. These other two modules, they're really not that useful because you generally don't lose your engine or rudder very often. Usually it requires a torpedo hit, so I don't run any of those options there. In the third slot, I am running Aiming Systems Mod 1 for the 7% reduction in the dispersion of your main battery. That is a huge difference on this ship. It really does make a difference, and I really don't see how you could run anything else on this ship unless you're just planning on flat operating at suicide ranges all the time and running a full-on secondary build. This does also increase the secondary battery's firing range by 5%, as well as decrease the dispersion of your secondary battery by 5%, but that's really not the reason why we take that mod. Of course, if you do want to have secondary spam galore, you could run Secondary Battery Mod 2 to increase its firing range by 20% and decrease its dispersion by 20%. And if you really hate carriers and want to go full on AA spec, there's AA Guns Mod 2 there for the 20% increase in anti-aircraft gun firing range. Main Battery Mod 2, we don't need it because the turrets turn really quick for a battleship. In the fourth slot, I am running Steering Gears Mod 2 for the 20% reduction in the rudder shift time. Of course, you could always run Damage Control Systems Mod 2 for the minus 15% minus 15% to the time of it extinguishing a fire, as well as 15% reduction in the time it takes to recover from flooding. Propulsion Systems Mod 2, I really don't see much use here. While the ship will see a lot of back and forth stuff, it's not, it's a battleship. It's never going to accelerate quickly, even with that module. In the last slot, I am running Concealment Systems Mod 1 for the 10% reduction in the detection range. The 5% increase on dispersion of shells fired at you is a nice side bonus, but really not the reason why I'm running this module. Target Acquisition Systems Mod 1, this really doesn't come into play that often. I mean, if you were to do a full-on secondary build, I could totally see running Target Acquisition Systems Mod 1, as well as Vigilance on your captain, to just make it so that torpedoes are spotted from, basically the time they're launched. But I generally find that good situational awareness helps avoid torpedoes better, and the 11.2 kilometer surprise you're dead cruiser action is a lot more fun to me. So that's why I run Concealment Systems Mod 1. Nothing really all that special to report in the ammunition and consumables. Pretty basic tier 8 heal, pretty basic catapult fighter. You do not get the... Oh, you do get the option of a spawning aircraft. Tickle my fancy. Well, there we go. So if you wanted to run a spawning aircraft, you could. I just don't think the accuracy is really there to justify it. So, alright, so let's go look at the ship in a battle, and we'll talk more about how it plays there. Alright, so... Roma, being as it's tier 8, sees a lot of tier 10 fights, and that's something you need to be prepared for. Also, because it does see a number of tier 6 fights, as well as tier 7 through 9 fights, you know, it does okay when it's in a tier 9 fight, but in tier 10 fights it really does struggle. Not because it can't penetrate through the armor, but because it's just not very effective in terms of durability. So this is a tier 8 fight. We are on Land of Fire, and it is just standard battle, which is not a very common form on this map. On this battle, I am going to go basically straight ahead and make a right-hand turn on the south side of the island to my right. That would be the island on the 4-5 line there in the D line. And we're going to attempt to kind of push in and really try and punish some ships if we can. We're going to get up and close and personal with this thing, but we're going to be in the right place at the right time to really maximize our damage potential. One thing to pay attention to is light cruisers when you're shooting at them. I would highly recommend taking a Japanese battleship aiming point where you put just a little bit below so you can see just a little bit of water. I'm literally talking like a few pixels worth of water between the hole, the water line of the ship you're aiming at, and the aiming point. And the reason for that is, if you don't, you have a tendency to over-penetrate their citadels, and we'll see that as well. Overall, you know, when you're operating at close ranges, the ship does do fairly well in terms of damage output. Like I said, the AP on the ship is very strong, especially for 15-inch guns, and I don't know. Overall, I think the ship, like I said, it's pretty average. I mean, it's fun to play, and I'll be curious to see how the stats kind of levelize later in the the time frame, because right now the stats are all sorts of wonky and crazy because you got everybody playing the ship. It just got released. It's the reason why I'm doing this video, and so I really think that there's a number of other. There needs to be some time to stabilize a little bit here. So this Cleveland is just kind of hanging out here. He's 15.5 kilometers away, and we're detected by something. But what is he doing? Oh, hi. Don't mind if I do. So dispersion, pretty average. Second salvo, we got a bounce. Okay, that's bad. Look at that, was a bad salvo too. It's not like the aiming issue was there. So we got one shell hit and it was a bounce, so no damage done. We have a Nicholas that's like at point blank range here. Yikes. Well, we're just gonna keep pushing on in. Nicholas in a tier 8 fight. I don't think that's really the ship that I would want to choose. Oh, the Cleveland pops up here. That Byron disappeared behind the island there. So you can see he's starting to shy away just a little bit there. And of course, that's usually what happens as cruisers turn away. So we add a little bit and, of course, straight overpen. And like I said, that is one of the problems with this ship, is it does have a tendency to overpen a lot. So this is a perfect demonstration of the reasons why people who are used to the Iowa's playstyle are going to feel the old Iowa's playstyle when it had an above water citadel. This is very reminiscent of exactly that. Roma. Your armor is very, very tanky, except for in certain circumstances like this. So wait, make sure we're clear. Very good tight cluster there, and a double citadel for 36,000 damage. And just like that, this poor Roma ahead of me just poof. So, yeah, that's a word to the wise there. If you are going to play the ship, you should probably be paying very heavy attention to how you are angled. And this Leander is just grinding at me, so does he end up getting killed? No, he survives. We don't kill the Roma either. I was really hoping for another Citadel hit there to finish him off, but nope. Look at that. So that aircraft, those aircraft, you got such a short amount of time. We finally shot one down, and we are facing off against a Hiryu, which the torpedo bombers on Hiryu, if I remember correctly, are not overly impressive. I think they're tier 6 ones. Oh, we got a Cleveland there doing... Wow. Yeah. Okay, found the Cleveland Citadel. Now we got a Bayern over here. We're coming around the edge of this mountain here so that we can get a few more targets, and then I realized, oh crap, I'm coming out broadside to this Amagi, and oh crap, there's a Nicholas at point blank range. Well, that's no good either. Well, oh, his shadow was popped up there briefly. Yeah, so you really do have to pay very special attention. Belfast. Okay, so Belfast waiting for those guns to reload. 2 seconds. 1 second. Yeah, I don't think we're going to get much out of that. Yeah, 1,200 damage. So things not looking up very highly right now. We are up to 55,000 damage. You can see, you know, the dispersion of shells, the very, very wide dispersion pattern. But again, 4,600 damage on a ship that is angled away from me, that's traveling away from me. Those deflection shots like that are very, very hard to get good, reliable penetration on. A quick check to make sure I don't Notzer myself, which I did quite often in my live stream. But definitely clearing to make sure that we can angle ourselves just enough to bring all of our guns to bear. And that was a wasted salvo on the Bayern. And at this point, I'm really hoping that I can just get another fire so I can burn the damage control party and get rid of this the deep damage over time. But yeah, we're not so lucky. So at this point, I'm gonna make a hard right-hand turn and Belfast. Okay, so we can shoot at the Belfast. That's interesting. I'm just a smidge too high on him, but he's gonna pop a smoke. But well, for once, the accuracy is cooperating. But 3 overpens. Like I said, not exactly. You know, the ship's strong suit is definitely not in the being able to just reliably delete cruisers and stuff from the match. It'll do it. Don't get me wrong, but you're definitely left for wanting there. And an Amagi that goes down. So that's 2 battleships that have been robbed from me. Oh well, they're dead, and winning is a good idea. Island claiming all of my shells like a complete and utter jerk. So this Nicholas is facing off against the Cleveland. That's never a good idea. And as you guys can probably expect, basically the accuracy of these guns, yeah. I probably could have had a little bit better aim, but yep. How about the rear gun? Bringing it in. Maybe bringing it in. Nope, he's dead. Alright, well, I thought maybe the rear gun would get to play, but apparently I totally misremembered what's actually going on. Okay, Edinburgh. So you can see we're leaving just that little bit of a... Wow, look at that. Wow. Yeah, 9,500 damage there. And a Citadel for 18,000 damage there, and down goes the Edinburgh. That Edinburgh was also robbed from me. Yeah. Anywho. So, anti-aircraft suite not working very hard. Going after this Leander, of course, only 4.8 kilometers, but this Hiryu is pushing up for some reason. I don't know what the reason is, because there's an Arizona there that he could easily delete off the face of the earth. There's a Leander there that he could have deleted off the face of the earth. There's a me there he could have deleted off the face of the earth, had he just been able to hang into the match just a little bit longer or not rush in here. I really thought he was going to camp behind the island and we weren't going to be able to do anything about it. But no, he's steaming full ahead, so, well, we'll just wait for him to come out and around, and, well, alright. We're going to take a shot, and look, you actually get pretty tight shot cluster there. There's a Citadel, 19,200 damage. Get those secondaries on there, burn our heal. Come on, secondaries, engage. 6.6 kilometers, you can do it. There we go. Yeah, they're not very accurate when you're not specced in the secondaries, so not hitting a very, very large object, such as a, you know, carrier at this range. And the carrier gets robbed from me. C'est la vie, as the French would say. Oh, French baguette's coming soon, too. And that was 6,000 damage. I don't know who smoked him. Must have been that Amagi, but yeah, that made it look like I did way more than 6,000 damage, but I promise you it was only 6,000. And bounce. So, very bow tanky, very, very effective at that, and oh, hello there, Mr. Monarch. You're turning broadside. Oh, okay. Well, how about this? Oh, 7K. Really? Only 4 shells at this range hit out of 9. You know, I remember Colorado back in the day operated exactly the same. And yeah, that was Monarch that got robbed from. Okay, so moving on. Roma, coming around the bend over here. We're up to 128,344 damage. We've got Confederate, for crying out loud. There's only 2 ships left at this point. No aircraft. We've only shot down 1. Our secondaries have been in the fight for, well, not really. Hoping to get a shot there at the Roma, but not so much. Ernst Gade decides to pop up there. It's 7 kilometers out. The aircraft spotting him, like, ooh, Roma or Ernst Gade. Tough decisions. Broadside Roma definitely takes precedence. And for good reason. There's that Citadel again. 23,000 damage. Now finally up to 151,443, and no. We did manage to shoot down another aircraft. Woo! Okay, so end battle screen there, 151,443 damage, 2 kills, 6 citadels, 1,851 base XP. There's the credits and there's the detailed report and the credits and XP screen. Overall, the ship is it's average. It has some challenges to it, but if you can play around those challenges, it is a fairly rewarding ship to play. I personally enjoyed. I thought it was worth the money. Anyway, I'm your Peacekeeper. Like, comment, subscribe, and thank you for watching.